This is going to be a batch of softer Lake Michigan stones. So these stones don't typically polish very well if I'm mixing them with other agates and jaspers. There's a lot of amygdaloidal basalt, porphyry, unakite, that sort of thing. Here they are wet, just so you can get an idea of what they would look like polished. So I'm loading these up into my vibratory tumbler. They've already been rounded if needed in the rotary, so I'm not showing that step. I'm going to add a lot of ceramic media to this just to help cushion it a little bit more. And then this now is the 220 grit silicon carbide. I get the bowl all loaded up and turn it on. I always like to kind of watch to make sure everything's mixing in nicely and to make sure there's enough water added in. It's always good to check to make sure that there's really good movement with the stones. Because these are softer, the slurry gets really thick really quickly, so you do have to check on it more frequently. I'm adding soap and water that helps everything rinse out better. I let these go for about 2 days in stage 2 before I rinse them. This first stage in the vibratory tumbler is the most difficult to rinse out because the slurry is so thick, and you need to be very thorough to make sure all of the grit is rinsed out of the stones so there's absolutely no carryover. I'm loading it back into my vibratory tumbler bowl, and I got to this point and I realized this wasn't as well rinsed as it needed to be. So I actually rinsed out the strainer, and then I'm going to dump the entire bowl back out, rinse it again before I re-add the stones back into the bowl. And this just highlights that you really need to be thorough, otherwise you will end up with some carryover grit and slurry, and that's going to ruin the next steps. Here I'm adding some pieces, a heart I cut and a fossil I cut, to the next stage, the 500 grit stage. I skipped 220 with these because they are softer and they didn't really need any additional smoothing or shaping. So this is the 500 grit. I added about 2 tablespoons, and then I'm watching as it mixes in to make sure that now that I've added even more stones, that things are still moving really well. After just a day in this stage, I'm ready to rinse it out. I've added soap, a little bit of water before I got to this point, and that makes the rinsing a lot easier. Normally after 500, I would go right to polish, but because these are softer, I'm adding sugar, and I'm doing a 1000 grit stage. I add just as much sugar as grit typically, although, I don't really measure the sugar. I just sort of go by how much seems about equal. The sugar really helps kind of slow things a little bit and cushion things a little bit, and I do feel like it makes a really big difference in the final polish with softer rocks like this batch of stones for obsidian or rhodonite, that sort of thing. I let the stones go in the 1000 grit with sugar for about a day again before I add soap, more water, and then I rinse them out. The final step then is polish. Again, I'm adding sugar, just as much sugar as I have polish, maybe even a little bit more than the polish itself. I'm watching it all get mixed in. It was in that for about a day again before I added soap, a little bit of water, and then I rinsed it out. I wasn't able to immediately dry and sort these, so I actually dumped it into this bucket of water to sit in. I do this so no polish gets dried out in any cracks or pits in the stones before I can actually inspect each stone individually. Here they are now, all dried out. I do feel like these turned out really well considering they're softer stones. They have a really nice shine. There's a lot of really cool pieces like these amygdaloidal basalts, or maybe they're variolites. This is the fossil I added in to the 500 stage, and some more of the fossils. These typically don't polish very well, so seeing them this shiny really pleases me. This is a little horn coral fragment that turned out really nicely. Another fossil that turned out great. And another fossil. These porphyry turned out really well. Those are hard to get a decent shine on if you're tumbling them with other hard stones. The variolites also turned out really well. Super pleased with those. Not sure what all of these ones are, but that one has a quartz vein. I'm not sure if we have some epidote and other stones in here. There are a lot of greens in this batch. Typically those don't polish well with other stones. This one is a stunner. It almost looks like bloodstone. Some unikites here. A piece of feldspar with a quartz vein. Love that. Some of these are almost like granite. A lot of wishing stones. That's really cool. The unikite wishing stone. This piece of pink feldspar is really neat. Not sure what this one is, but it's really cool looking. This little cute piece of unikite is one of my favorites of the batch. A lot of really cool, unique pieces in this batch. I liked all the veining in that one. A lot of color. Look at that piece of feldspar. That's a good one. Not sure what this little blue stone is. And then the heart that I tossed in there. I really do love all of the greens. I did these mostly for my sister because she just loves the green rocks the most. So I made a little batch of them and I set them all aside for her to look through. So moving forward in the future, I'm definitely going to set aside these stones and polish them separate from our other Lake Michigan stones just because I really do think they turn out much better.